Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to episode 2 of the chat messaging application that we're trying to build out. And in the very last episode, we were able to get pretty far in terms of the chat bubbles and also the text to kind of auto size inside of our table view right over here. And what we want to do in today's lesson is to provide the option to change the background color of all of these chat bubbles over here, here, and here, as well as provide a way to sort of align these chat bubbles to the left or all the way to the right, depending on whether or not this chat message is an incoming or outgoing message. So overall, I think it's going to be quite a bit of work to get all of this done in today's video. So why don't we get started with Xcode right now? Okay, everybody, we are now back inside of good old Xcode. And let's see, the first thing I would like to do is to just simply rerun my app inside of the simulator. This way I can confirm that everything is where it needs to be. And there we go, everything looks great. We have these 3 messages inside of this view controller file. So you see text message is an array of messages. And we have 1, 2, and 3 inside of our table view controller, right? This is kind of where we left off in the last video. And one small bug that I would like to show you with our application right now is what exactly happens when I enter a very short message, right? So let's say, yo dog, what up? And let's just run this code. And you'll see that the chat bubble for this message over here, this last one, the width of this chat bubble is actually really large, right? And that's not exactly what we want. We can do a little bit better by applying a very short quick fix here. And the fix has to go inside of this chat message cell file. And so all of these guys are just these chat message cell objects. And inside of here, so line 35, we're setting up the width anchor for the message label, and we're constraining it to some kind of constant of 250. And in other words, the width of all of these bubbles right now is the width of about 250. And one thing that you can actually do to improve this anchor is to use a different anchor. And this one is actually very similar, so let me show you what that is. By typing in message label, we'll use the width anchor again. And for the constraint call, you can actually constrain it less than or equal to some kind of constant. And the constant we'll use 250 again. And let me run this code again, and you'll see kind of what this constraint is going to do instead. And you'll see that it is actually going to use the maximum width of 250. And if it doesn't need all of that space, it's just going to give it just enough space so that the text can fill it out kind of like that over there. So that's kind of a neat trick that hopefully you guys can kind of understand and utilize in your future applications. All right, so that's kind of where I wanted to start off in today's video. And what I want to move on to now is the ability to sort of give these chat bubbles over here a different color depending on whether the message is incoming or outgoing, like this over here, right? So the question is, how exactly do we modify these chat bubbles inside of our cell to have the ability to do this? Well, this is actually kind of simple. And the way you actually introduce this option is to go inside of the top of this chat message cell file. And I'm just going to introduce a very simple Boolean variable called is, so is incoming. And this guy is going to be a Boolean variable. And let me just declare it as a forced unwrapped optional like that. And for this variable, what I want to do is I want to track whenever I set this variable like that. Okay, so inside of here, I'm going to say print 1, 2, 3. And you can now build your code. And what this variable is going to do is kind of allow me to set the incoming Boolean on these cells. And the way I'm actually going to utilize this variable is to go back into the view controller file all the way on the top. And if I can go down to the method of self or row at, I can remove these comment lines. And down here for my chat message cell, this object, you can say cell dot is incoming, and you can set this variable to be whatever you want now. And so for this is incoming variable, I'm just going to set it equal to true and run this application. You should be able to see a couple of print statements down here. So you see 1, 2, 3 being printed out 4 times. And the reason why that is happening is because every time we set this variable, we're just calling this print statement here. And because we have 4 cells being visible inside of our table view, we're seeing each one of these cells print out this statement down below. Okay, so that's kind of what's happening over here. And the way I'm going to utilize this variable is to actually change the background color of this bubble background view, which is currently yellow. And so why don't we say bubble background color, and we're going to set it equal to some kind of color, but we're going to use this ternary operator to kind of decide what color we want. So the background color, I'm going to use a value of white, otherwise a value of dark gray, like that. And so I'm just going to run my code now, and you should be able to see that all of my text bubbles have a background color of white currently. All right, so you can't exactly see that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first turn the background color of the table view, so the entire table view here inside of my view controller. I can say table view dot background color. No, that's not what I want. Background color equals dot, let's see, dot black. That'll give it completely black. And you'll see what that does. Let's kind of see. So that's black down there. And I don't really want it to be completely black. I want it to be somewhat gray, like this color. And to get that light gray color, you can use UI color and use this constructor of white. I like to use 0.95 and alpha of 1, and you'll get a very, very light gray color for your table view. So let's see, that's what it is down there. And the next thing you can do is you can turn off the background color for all these cells here, here, and here. You just want to go back inside of your message cell, and somewhere inside of your initializer, you can say something like background color equals dot clear to sort of clear it out. And the moment that you do that, you'll see that the text bubbles have a nice white color, kind of like so. All right, so that looks pretty good. The corner radius, you can change it from 5 to something like 16, and you'll have a much larger corner radius, making it much more circular, kind of like that. And that looks a little bit too circular, so I'm going to change it back to 12. And what I would like to do now is I would like to change the white of a couple of these bubbles to actually be this dark gray color. And the way you can do that is you have to toggle the is incoming to false for certain values inside of your table view, right? So is incoming is always the true, so that's kind of why they're all white. What I can do is I can use the index path here. And so index path dot row, and if I say modulo equal to 0, this is pretty much going to change the color based on whether or not the row value is odd. So if it's odd, so let's see, if it's 0, I guess that's even, it's going to be white. This is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. And so it allows it to alternate using this little modulo operator right over here. So checks for odd or even using that calculation. All right, so hopefully that's not too confusing. And one final thing I would like to do is to modify the text color over here to be white or black, because that's a little bit hard to read. So this is actually the message label there. You can say text color and set it is incoming. And if it's this white color, I guess I want it to be black. And let's see, dot white. I think that's the correct logic that I need. And we just need to run that, and bam, there you go. We have our white on black, and you have your black on white. So our application looks pretty good right now. We have our alternating colors of white and black. And the next thing I would like to do is to go back inside of our view controller. And basically, instead of setting this is incoming to this calculation over here, we would really like to associate the color based on the text message up above inside of this array somehow, right? So the best way of doing this is to actually introduce some kind of class or struct that allows you to capture both the text message and also the state of whether or not it's an incoming message, right? And this is actually very easy to do. You just want to declare a struct either in a new file or just right above this class here. And so I'm going to declare this chat message struct, and a couple of properties that will exist on this guy is going to be the text property, which is going to be a string, pretty much one of these text messages here, here, and there. And the other one is going to be this is incoming boolean. So just like that. And so that is my struct, and this struct is going to allow me to capture both properties. So what I mean is I'm going to say let chat messages equal this array again. And let me create my chat message like so. I'm just going to copy this guy, pop that in there. And let's set this guy equal to true for the first one. And let's copy this a couple of more times. I'll set this one to false, and maybe I'll set this one to false as well. And then what I can do is I can just copy all of these messages, and let's just do this right now. It might be a little bit tedious, but nonetheless, we will finish this quick little exercise and paste that in there. Okay, so now that I have my array of chat messages, I can attempt to run the code, but you can see I have a couple of errors, and first I'll just delete that bit of code. The chat messages here no longer exist, and we need to use the, let's see, chat messages.count. That looks good. And over here, we still have text messages. So instead of typing all that out, let's say let chat message come from our chat messages array, and we'll select it depending on the index path row. And then the text for the message label, you can simply say chat message.text like that. And then for this guy, you can simply say cell.isIncoming equals chat message.isIncoming like that. Okay, I believe that's all the changes we need. And so once you have that change, you can see that for the values of isIncoming true, it appears white right there. And for the false values, you get this dark color. Okay, so that looks pretty awesome. And one thing that I would like to kind of do inside of my applications is to kind of eliminate all of this code here. And I prefer to have all of this code inside of my cell instead. So what I mean is I actually prefer this style where I can say var chat message. And inside of here, I can declare my chat message and use a bang to force unwrap it. Use the did set pattern like what we had down here. Okay, so after you do this, you can just copy this code in here. Don't think I need that anymore. And this isIncoming is no longer available, so it's actually chat message.isIncoming like that. So that looks pretty good, and we'll make that change over there as well. So that is kind of what we need. And because I removed that variable, you have to go back to your view controller file, and you no longer have this accessible. So what you should do instead is just say cell.chatMessage equals your entire chat message object. You don't need that. And you can try to run again, and you don't really need this either anymore. So that looks good. You can comment that out. If you try to run it, I believe we're missing the text being set inside of the bubble. So all these text messages are the same. What we need to do inside of here is say message label.text. It needs to come from our chat message variable and .text like that. And hopefully that will fix our code. Let me remove the comments, and there you go. That looks pretty darn good to me. And let's kind of move on to the last feature for today's video. And that feature is to allow our chat bubbles to kind of align on the left side or the right side, depending on whether or not it's incoming, right? So the question is, how exactly do we do that using constraints and using anchors instead of our code, right? So currently our messages over here, they're aligned to the left side using this anchor of leading. So let me move that out of the way. So this has the leading anchor kind of anchored to the cell's leading anchor and has a padding of 32 from the left side. So that's kind of how that works over here. So that's inside of my constraints array. So in order to give our chat bubbles the option of aligning on the left or the right, let me actually show you how this works by kind of taking the leading anchor over here. I'm going to take it outside of our array. So this is my array here. Let me just remove that comment. And I want to place it somewhere down here. So that's my constraint right there. Let me remove the comma. And if I copy and paste that code, that's kind of what it looks like. If I put a space here, I think I can do it one more time. It might look a little bit better. And so our message label constraints are up there, and we have our bubble background view on the bottom. And then finally, we are activating these constraints over here. So let me just paste that down there, clean up the spacing a little bit, and everything looks much better now. Okay, so what exactly do we want to do with this leading anchor constraint? Constraint to the cell's leading anchor, right? Well, you can actually activate this constraint manually if you just do it over here. So I'm going to say let leading constraint equals all that. And I'm going to say leading constraint is active equals to true. And what you'll see is the application will look exactly the same as it did before because we're manually activating it over here. If you set it equal to false, you'll see that the leading anchor is no longer active, and it's going to be kind of placed on the left side like that. So not perfect, but that's kind of what happens when you set this is active to false. And what you can do is you can actually create a trailing constraint over here. And instead of using the leading anchor, let's see, right over here, this leading anchor to the cell's leading anchor, you can do the opposite effect with trailing anchor. And you can say constraint equal to, let's use that one. And this guy, we are going to kind of plant it all the way on the right side. So this will be the cell's trailing anchor like that. And why don't I pop in a constant of -32 as well? And then I'll say trail constraint. This should actually be trailing constraint. That makes a little bit more sense. Paste that in there and say is active equals to true. And what this is going to do is it's going to slide this chat bubble all the way to the right side like that. And that's pretty much how we provide the option of anchoring it on the left or anchoring it on the right over here. We just need to toggle this boolean or this boolean, right? So that's the logic behind these two constraints. And what I would like to do is during the is incoming check over here instead of chat message, I want to say something like if chat message is incoming, if this boolean value is true, I want to toggle those constraint booleans in here. So for example, something like leading constraint dot is active equals to true. I want to be able to do something like this, right? But you can't really do that inside of our code because these variables aren't available. So you can't do that just yet. And the fix to this is to make sure that these properties or these variables become an instance property on this chat message cell. And what I mean is you can say let leading constraint, or instead of using a let, we want to make a variable. And this guy, this leading constraint, needs to be a type. Let's see, this guy gives you back an NS layout constraint. So we'll use that type. Let me type that out, NS layout constraint. And the easier way of doing this is to use a force unwrap like so with a bang. And because all of this code executes inside of the initializer, you're pretty sure that this leading constraint is going to be something if you execute this code here. So what I mean is we want to delete that. This leading constraint will eventually turn into whatever this guy returns. And then we'll do the same thing for the trailing constraint as well. So var trailing constraint, let this sucker be NS layout constraint. Remove the let over there, not that button. Let me just hit the delete over here. I have a new keyboard, so sometimes when I hit the delete, I actually hit the home button. And that's kind of what happens when you buy new equipment. But let's see, so we have the leading constraint and trailing constraint set up now. Let me move these variables to the top of the file because that's really where they belong. And so that looks good. And let's see, inside of here, what I want to do is leading constraint is active equals to true. And then you also want to disable the trailing constraint, or pretty much the other constraint over here. And you can do this inside of the else case as well. So what we're going to do is, if it's incoming, we're going to activate one of those and deactivate the other one. Inside of here, you want to kind of flip the Boolean values to make everything work. And so leading is going to be false and trailing is going to be true. That way you get your chat messages to be aligned on the left for the certain messages that are incoming. And then the ones that are not, they are aligned to the right side over there. So that looks pretty good, right? If you go back to your view controller file, you can go all the way up to the top here. You can introduce some other messages. So let's set the incoming to true. And this message should appear on the left with a white background bubble. So that should work. I don't really see any problem with the code right now. And bam, there you go. The white message appears right below, like so. Okay guys, that's going to finish up today's lesson. In the very next video, we're going to take a look at how we can provide these section headers right over here in the very light green. So you see one header there, and also a couple of more down below. And so basically these headers are going to capture the date for each one of these messages inside of these groups here, and down below as well. And finally, if you want to learn more about Swift development, make sure to check out the couple of courses using the links in the description below. If you want to download the source code for today's video and today's project, you can find the link down below as well. That's going to be it for today, guys. I'll see you in the very next video. Bye-bye.